Hello everybody, welcome to Awesome Rusty Bucket. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already and drop a like on this video. It only takes 1 second and makes a massive difference. I put my finger up too early, but whatever. Also subscribe if you have not already. But today is Hot Takes, as you well know, on Sundays and Wednesdays for the foreseeable future. Let's go ahead and get into it. Blockbuster trades for perennial all-stars are more risky than popular perception. Besides for the Anthony Davis trade, many of these teams acquiring stars do not improve by as much as advertised, and depleted assets get into cap hell as a result, ultimately leading to more headaches. I do think there is something to be said about the slow and steady approach and the valuing your assets approach that, like, let's say the OKC Thunder have been doing. At the same time, I think it exists on a spectrum in a way where you can go too far, where you're like overvaluing draft capital. Like, if you can turn that into a player who's just very good right now, you should do it. That said, it seems like teams have been willing to get fast and loose with it enough that the asking price for superstar level players has become like 5 to 7 draft picks plus X amount of young players. And as a result, I do think trading for a star player has much more risks to it now than it did in the past. If you look at what trades looked like for star players like in the 2000s, it's like Rip Hamilton, Tayshaun Prince, and 2 first-round picks is what was being offered for Kobe Bryant at his absolute peak. And mind you, Rip and Tayshaun were getting into their older age by the time that trade proposal was happening. So, yeah. It's just the league is entirely different in terms of how those assets work, and I think in the modern context, I completely agree. It's a huge risk. Jaden McDaniels can become everything Michael Porter Jr. already is, but also as a multiple-time all-defensive first-team player. I feel like that's a weird comparison to make. I also feel like you're making the suggestion Michael isn't a good defender, like, at all, potentially, which is not true. Obviously, it makes sense for you to kind of uphold that reputation given the past few years, but in this postseason, he was excellent defensively. And I also don't think Jaden McDaniels' offensive game will be very reminiscent of what Michael's is. I think you are taking for granted the fact that Michael is one of the best three-point shooters in the entire league, one of the best shooting prospects basketball has ever seen. He needs to get a little bit more consistent in every regard, but I don't think Jaden will ever be anywhere near as good of a shooter as Michael Porter Jr. is, but at the same time, Michael will never be anywhere near as good of a defender as McDaniels is. I don't know, it's just a weird comparison to make. I'm with you on Jaden McDaniels being good, but what does Michael Porter Jr. have to do with this? Okay, I know what this stands for. I'm going to try and say their actual names. Archuis Karnisovas, one of those two, and Mark Eversley are worse GMs than Gar Forman and John Paxson. Yeah, backing Boylan was a huge mistake, but they at least had the balls to rebuild when they had to and acquired good pieces that AK just gave away for a first-round exit. They have continued to lose on the margins and push the team in the wrong direction. Now, this is comparing a shit sandwich to a piss burger. There's no bet. This isn't going good either way. You're not going to have a good time either way, and I feel like we're wasting our time with these semantics. But I really what I want to harp on here is what I said when the Bulls finally transitioned to a new front office, which was, guys, do not just assume that these guys are going to be good and competent at their job just because they're not Garpax. And then people did exactly that. Trust in AK became a huge meme, and I was like, that seems really counterproductive to me. Why would you go with that? What's the benefit of just being like, yes, we trust authority. You got this, guys. We believe in you explicitly. There was no benefit to it. I imagine they got too fucking high in their own heads about how good they were, and then they blew it all on being a first-round exit, as you mentioned. I think it comes down to ownership at this point. They don't actually let people be who they want to be, and they hire guys who are going to be yes men for them and go whatever direction they want to fucking go. I don't want to go down this route. Let's just say they both fucking suck. I hate being a Bulls fan, and let's move on. Evan Mobley will be an MVP candidate and Defensive Player of the Year in the 2024 season. He's putting on strength and will be a bigger part of the offense this upcoming season. While I will agree with you that he has a strong chance at winning Defensive Player of the Year, I thought he had made a really good case to close this year, but it's just a little bit too late. His offense is not going to be good enough for him to be an MVP caliber guy. Like, even if he is utilized more in the offense, at best, we're talking about like a 20 point per game guy. And that's just not a high enough point average to win MVP, even as the best defender in the NBA, because, I mean, Giannis has been arguably the best defender in the NBA while averaging 27 and 12 and not one MVP. So sure as shit, Evan Mobley ain't going to make that happen. But a breakout year from Evan, more offense from him, a DPOY campaign, that seems perfectly within the realm of possibility to me. MVP candidate is a stretch, though. Larry Bird is not top 10 all time. This is an interesting take to me, and I've thought about this recently because I want to make a top 75 all time list. I made a correcting the NBA's top 50 list way back when. It's a terrible list. I hate my all time list that's publicly out there, and I hate that it's the only version of my all time beliefs that exist. So with that in mind, I want to make a new one. And I'm thinking lately, I'm going to be a lot more real with how I present this. I'm going to be pretty explicit in what I truly feel about these players, whereas when I made the first one, I tried to be a little conservative, where I was like, yeah, I have my strong opinions, but maybe I'll move a player 3 spots lower than most people would have him because I think he's overrated, rather than the like 10 spots I really want to move him. In this case, going for this one, I'm just going to take the gloves off. People can disagree all they want, but I think there's a strong chance Larry Bird either falls outside of my top 10 or he is like 10. Because if I'm just going down the list of players that I believe to be definitively should be ranked higher than him all time, I would go with, this is in no order, by the way, but Michael Jordan, LeBron, Kareem, Magic, Bill Russell, Stephen Curry, Hakeem Olajuwon, Tim Duncan. That's 9. I'm not missing anybody, I don't think. Oh, Shaq. That's Shaq. Yeah. That's 9 right there. But my fingers, I lost track. I was counting on my fingers and I moved my fingers weird and lost track of it. I don't know. Maybe that was 9. Maybe that was 10. But yeah, outside of the top 10, it's plausible for sure. The Sacramento Kings regressing is imminent. I don't know why you would say that, because, I mean, they were a very, very good offense and all those pieces are still there. And I think they'll be a little bit better defensively this upcoming year. They didn't get much better, but they didn't get worse. I feel like they'll be the exact same team this year, if not a little bit better, just for more experience. I don't know why that would be imminent. Maybe a couple of teams leapfrogged them in the standings just because that happens naturally year to year. But like, in terms of actually the quality of basketball Sacramento brings to the table, I imagine it will be very similar. Kevin Garnett is a top 10 player in NBA history and is overlooked because he does not fit the traditional idea of an all-time great. Volume scoring, multiple rings, etc. Yeah, I mean, he would be someone who's borderline. And honestly, between him and Larry Bird, that's an interesting conversation, because if we're talking about who I believe was a better player at their absolute peak, I would go with Kevin Garnett. The issue that exists with Kevin is that he is one of those guys who was very, 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 very good for a couple of years, and his absolute peak is bananas, but didn't achieve a ton and didn't actually win a ton. He had, I believe, 2 or so 50-plus win seasons with the Timberwolves, and that was pretty much it. And then, obviously, he did some winning with the Celtics, but that wasn't his absolute peak. So I don't know. The resume is a little thin, but the actual player is ridiculous. I also think the scoring thing with Kevin is a little overblown, particularly especially considering how many people just universally have Tim Duncan so much higher. I obviously understand with the rings thing. He obviously has one more MVP as well, but I think Kevin Garnett peaked arguably just as high as Tim Duncan, and he scored like 24 points a game in his best season on better than league average efficiency or around league average efficiency. One of the best mid-range shooting bigs the game has ever seen. I believe in his 04 season, he was statistically a better mid-range shooter than Dirk. And then strong enough finisher. I think very, very good at creating off of the dribble. Great passer. I think Kevin Garnett I think the scoring thing is overblown, and his all-around game is ridiculous. He's a top 5 defender of all time, as far as I'm concerned. One of the best on-ball creating forwards the league has ever seen, and a complete unicorn that does not get enough credit for being the league's first real unicorn. But yeah, Kevin's very good. That's my point. I'm making a main channel video about Kevin Garnett very soon because I have a lot to say about him because I've been doing some research into the 2000s era, and man, the guy was good. Anyway, shout out to Rudy for editing this video, and goodbye.